All right, let's get started. Martha, will you lead us through the introductions, please?
Yeah, it's so great to see everyone. I'm really excited to be hosting this and collaborating. This is going to be an awesome workshop or session. We're going to learn a lot. We're going to share a lot. We're going to get to know each other and hopefully inspire and agitate for some awesome organizing happening throughout the U.S. around the infrastructure bill. So hopefully we meet those goals with y'all being here today. We have some awesome presenters, one of which I am. So I'll go ahead and introduce myself and then I'll pass it over to our other presenters to introduce themselves. So I'm Marta Valadez. I'm an organizer with National Jobs with Justice. I live in so-called El Paso, Texas. I'm originally from the 909 in California. I've been with Jay for going on 2 years next month. I got picked up right in the middle of the pandemic. The first year I was laid off. I was an apprentice electrician here with 583, local 583 in El Paso here, but life, called me back to organizing, and so I didn't get to finish, but I did hold some tools at some point. And now I'm, fighting and organizing with labor and community groups in our local networks and with our partners to make change through policy and through direct action throughout the United States. And so we're really happy to be partnering. I'm also on the action committee with Connie and a few others who are on this call with Cookie. I don't know who else is on, can't see everybody, but we're really, really energized, and we're amped, and we hope that y'all, join up with us on the action committee and get inspired and, build and move mountains wherever you are. So that's me, and I will pass it over to one of my co-presenters, Connie.
Hi, everybody. I'm Connie Ashbrook. I'm co-chair of the National Taskforce on Tradeswomen's Issues. Prior to that, I served for 21 years as executive director of Oregon Tradeswomen. And before that, I worked in the trades myself as an elevator constructor for 17 years. So I'm really glad to be here with all of you to pass on this information that we've learned to really try to make a difference for women in the trades and our brothers in the trades as well. So I'm going to pass this on to Elizabeth Skidmore.
Hi, everybody. Very excited to be here. See a lot of old friends and some folks I don't know, both of which are great. I've been a union carpenter for 34 years, and I'm on staff as a business rep organizer for the Carpenters. And I put in my chat in Nipmuc land, also known as Boston, Massachusetts, USA. I've been somewhat obsessed with getting more women in and figuring out how do we actually be effective at getting the numbers up. Because we were doing a bunch of stuff for a long time that wasn't effective, even though we were working really hard with big hearts. So I'm excited because I think this training is under the category of like work smarter, not harder. I look forward to it.
Great, and let's introduce our wonderful tech person, Eve Mefford. Do you want to come on say hi to people?
Hi, everybody. I'm Eve Mefford. I'm a researcher at the Institute for Women's Policy Research in DC, and I'm also co-chair of the Task Force Communications Subcommittee. So, and I'll be handling the tech side of things today.
Great, and let's pass it back to Martha and the next slide for all of you to introduce yourself through some breakout sessions. And I'm Connie Ashbrook, co-chair of the National Taskforce on Tradeswomen's Issues. And the task force is a national coalition of tradeswomen, allies, and advocates promoting access, opportunity, retention, and equity for women in the construction industry and other trades occupations. We promote federal and local public policy and advocacy initiatives to improve, enforce, fund, and promote best practices in apprenticeship training, workforce development, career tech, non-traditional employment, and job site equity for tradeswomen. We are staffed by all volunteers, so we have time to educate our members and our broad number of folks that want to learn from us about advocacy, but we don't have the bandwidth to be directly involved but we're glad to put on seminars like this so you can learn and we can pass on the information that we've learned. Next slide, please.
This one's mine. All right. Every time we come here, we want to make sure we're grounded in where we are, and who we're with, and our common, principles. And one of those pieces that keeps us grounded and in solidarity is our pledge here. So you don't have to say it out loud. If you want to just, give some life to the words, you can on mute, but I'll go ahead and read it for us. So our pledge, by entering this space and or participating in this organization, and that's the National Taskforce on Tradeswomen's Issues, I pledge to foster a safe and supportive environment that embraces our diverse and unique community, that creates a safe space for free from biases faced by marginalized groups, including but not limited to discrimination based on immigration status, race, gender, sexual orientation, ability, or age. We unapologetically embrace our diversity. It is what makes us strong. So we just want to make sure we get a verbal yeah that y'all are down with this. So if everyone can give me a thumbs up or put it in the chat, this is good, we're good to go. I'm here. I'm going to be mindful with this in this space. So thank you all. I think it's going to be the ground rules next, right?
Yeah, next slide, please.
Hell yeah. Thank you all for the solidarity. Okay. So here's a list of ground rules. And, if you want to drop a few more in the chat, maybe to make sure we are in agreement with what everybody needs in the space around how we interact with each other, that would be great. I'll read a few of them here. And then if there's more in the chat, Connie, if you want to read them after I go through, keep an eye out. So please mute your audio when you are not talking. Take turns speaking or asking questions. Step up, step back, right? And that just means, be mindful of how much you're taking up space. And I also like to say with that piece of equity principle around thinking about folks who are historically marginalized, left out, or put to the side in conversations. If you're someone who is, more privileged, just check your privilege, be mindful if you're talking too much or you're seeing other folks who aren't speaking up, know that maybe the facilitator might hold on to calling on you to make sure we have equity in the space of talking time. And then be respectful in your comments. Stay on camera if you can, show your beautiful faces. Put questions in the chat, and we will also have time to answer questions at the end. And this is serious. We reserve the right to remove individuals from the meeting if they violate the ground rules or pledge that I just read before, after receiving a first warning. So we want to keep this flowing. We want to have positive vibes in here. We want everybody to walk away feeling like, damn, this was a good use of my time. So we just want everyone to be mindful and respectful of everybody's time and presence and spirit and energy here. Connie, did I miss anything on the chat?
No, but let's invite people. If you have other ground rules that you want to see us follow in the meeting, feel free to put in the chat.
Awesome. Alrighty, so then I believe it's Connie, it's yours on the summary of potential benefits.
Yeah, so we're talking about the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, which is otherwise known as the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, or bill. So you'll hear us talking about IIJA, and that's what we're talking about. It is a huge amount of money coming to each state through that act. And there's a lot of great equity provisions made possible by this legislation and by how the administration is rolling out the funds, and especially in the competitive grants. But not every state is going to pay attention to that. So that's why we're doing this seminar. Is we think that advocates and allies like you can really make a difference in your state. Next slide, please, and turning it over to Liz.
All right. So here's what we're hoping to cover today. Why we're doing this, what's in it for you. what exactly is in the BIL, although broad strokes. We're gonna mute Nicole, okay, she's muted. How to understand, how to look up what money is coming to your state. So for example, 9.2 billion is coming to Massachusetts. And there's a place you can look up how much is coming to your state so you can talk to your state officials about it. There are other laws that establish workforce goals for women and people of color, separate from the BIL. So to have that information about that. And then sort of a little bit of concrete, what can I actually do to advocate that these workforce goals are met in my state? Because if your state is anything like mine, in spite of a lot of good things happening here, our Department of Transportation has done a terrible job around hiring diverse workers on their projects. So they're going to need a lot of pushing, even here where lots of other good things are happening. All right, next slide. So I don't know about you, but like when I started my apprenticeship, all I could do was try to figure out how to be a good carpenter. And that took me about 10 years. And then I got hired on staff. And so then I spent like the next 10 years trying to understand my union. And it was really only after 20 years in the trades that I started thinking about policy stuff. So if at any point you're feeling overwhelmed by any of this, hang in there, because we all started like not really knowing anything. And I just want to like put a little context around this, which is, you know, you could do a little bit and you could do a lot, and anywhere in between is still going to make a difference. So just kind of remember that context. So like, you know, I know a lot of you are working full time in the field. A lot of you may be parents. There's hard stuff going on in the world. You may or may not have a lot of bandwidth, but even a little bit can make a big difference. Next slide, please. So we're going to do another quick breakout because we are trying not to have an hour and a half of us yakking at you. And I think it's helpful to just ground us in like, what is the time you made a difference in something? And it could be big or small. It could be in your family. It could be on your job site. It could be at your religious institution. It could be in your neighborhood, like anytime. Because the reality is we've all made change. And so let's ground ourselves in a change that each of us has made sometime in our life, however big or small, before we go talk about these kind of bigger changes with all this money. So we're going to send folks again into random breakouts. You're going to have 6 minutes to answer this question. And if, you know, somebody in each group can kind of take the lead to make sure everybody gets a chance to answer. What's one time you were able to change something big or small? Could be within your family, workplace, neighborhood, job site, or it could be you helped pass legislation or something, you know, quite big. And it certainly could be within your life as a tradeswoman. So one place where you were able to affect change. All right, Eve, how are we doing on moving? We're good. All right, enjoy each other.
I think we're all back. So just wanted to remind everybody that your state is definitely going to control how the funds are spent that comes to your state and what kinds of equity provisions are in place. Even though there are laws about equity in the federal funds and other federal laws that govern federal contracting, many states ignore that without pressure, and that's where you come in. Your voice is going to make a difference for dozens, hundreds, or even thousands of tradeswomen and men of color in the trades in your state, including you. So thank you for being here on this call so we can talk about these things. Next slide, please. Here is a chart of where the money is going. It's so much money, I can't even imagine it. And I apologize if this slide has somebody's shirt in the upper right-hand corner. We couldn't find a copy of this chart without that funny picture. But you'll see most of the money is going to transportation, roads, bridges, and major projects. And the funding will mostly be distributed to the states. Some of it will be directly contracted by the federal government, but again, most of the funds go to the State Department of Transportations through formula funding and competitive grants. Next slide, please. We are focusing in this presentation mostly on departments of transportation. They're getting almost half the money, and their information has been easiest to find. Maybe you and your state will be able to find information about the broadband and the power infrastructure and the water infrastructure. So all of that is going to have federal contractors working on those projects that we can influence because of the federal government's equity requirements. Next slide, please. I'm turning it back over to Martha.
So this is a link right here. You might be wondering like, hey, how can I get the information specifically from the state that I live in, or you want to share some knowledge with somebody in another state, you would, and this presentation, we're going to send it out to everyone who registered. So we'll make sure that y'all get this in a folder with some complimentary resources. But this link here that we just shared is state by state fact sheets. Basically tells you the rundown. You can click any of them and it will give you a sample of a rundown of what your state will be receiving in a summary, basically, of like, is it going to be for bridges? Is it going to be like what type of resources? Is it going to be for infrastructure within your state? And of course, we're going to be looking for specific pieces, but you have access to all of the sort of like overview of how the funds are going to be distributed in your state. So so yeah, that's what that link is for. And I think we'll share it, and you can, I don't think we want to put it in the chat because we want to keep everybody on the PowerPoint, but like I said, you'll get it after this this presentation. All right, Liz, I'll kick it to you.
All right. So when we're thinking about laws and enforcing laws, we got to know what's the law, what does it say, and who's supposed to enforce it. So the law that we'll get into a little bit more in a sec is Executive Order 11246. I know a lot of you are very familiar with it. It may be new to a few people. Oh, Kina, hi. Sorry. 11246 was passed in 1978, and it established hiring goals for women and people of color on almost all federally funded construction. Like every contract over $10,000, which is essentially almost all. So and then the federal agency that is supposed to enforce it is the Office of Federal Contract Compliance, or OFCCP. So we have 11246, OFCCP. The challenge is OFCCP has been underfunded for my, 34 years in the trades and probably before then. And in fact has focused on what the government calls supplies and services, which is like if they buy toilet paper for a federal building, or, hire a cleaning company for a federal building. They have not focused on construction, which is terrible for us and terrible given the huge amount of federal dollars spent on construction. There have been some exceptions. But first, let me go, next slide, please, just a little bit more about what 11246 offers. And you'll get language about all this in the packet we're going to send after today. So as I mentioned, it sets hiring goals for women and people of color. Nationally, the goal for women is 6.9%, has been that since shortly after 78. It was originally supposed to go up, but it hasn't. And then the goal for people of color varies by what part of the country you're in, but those numbers have not been increased in a very long time. And horrifically, for Eastern Massachusetts, the goal is 4%. But what's important about 11246 is it applies to all this infrastructure spending. And the difference between having a goal for women and people of color versus not having one is much bigger than the fact that the goals for both are way too low. Both the goals, the executive order came out of really strong advocacy by tradeswomen and civil rights leaders back in the 60s and 70s. And there is, they do list 16 steps that a contractor has to do to show they tried to meet the goal if they don't meet the goals. If they meet the goals for women and people of color, doesn't matter about the 16 steps. If they don't meet the goals, but they can document that they did the 16 steps, then they sort of get a pass by the feds. So next slide, please. Interestingly, there's a few good things in these 16 steps, even though this has not been well enforced. So they're supposed to recruit women and people of color from community organizations. So any of you here representing pre-apprenticeships or tradeswomen groups, that would be you. You're supposed to encourage employees to help recruit. You're supposed to review the equal employment obligations. You're supposed to evaluate promotion opportunities. You're supposed to ensure and maintain a working environment free of harassment. You're also, didn't make it on this, you're supposed to hire more than 2 women on any job site. Because even back in 78, they recognized that, you know, when we're alone, it's just that much harder. I want to the key thing, so the Office of Federal Contract Compliance is supposed to enforce this. They're understaffed and underfunded. Their solution to this under Democratic presidents has been to have a system of mega projects. So that's sort of picking a large project to prioritize and do more of the work that they're supposed to do on, since they don't have enough staff or money to cover everyone. So that would be one question you want to ask in your area. Are there any mega projects coming up under the BIL? And under this president, mega projects are $35 million is the threshold for becoming a mega project. Now that doesn't mean all projects over 35 million will become a mega project and get the extra attention, but that's if the OFCCP decides they want to prioritize that project, they can, and that also could be an advocacy thing in your area to push, if there's a project over 35 million, to push OFCCP to call it a mega project. And I think I'm passing it on to Martha.
Oh, I'm realizing now I was muted. I was saying it came so quick. I was going to respond to someone in the chat and I'm like, oh, now we're already at my turn. So this is just like we're getting at, we understand what the law says, but the law may say one thing, but what should be happening in the field, right? You are on the work side, maybe in some places, some states more progressive, but I know when I worked here, I was one of 3 on the in my union, and also like only a handful at my last work site. So how do we actually engage and hold the institutions accountable and enforce the rules, that the laws that are in place, right? And so something you might want to think about asking your state public officials for are things like fair hiring of women and BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, people of color workers, right? Fair retention, equitable work hours for women and BIPOC workers, respectful work environment to retain our folks, free from gender and racial harassment and bullying as well. A job site free from hateful graffiti or symbols. We all know what are in those porta potties. So equitable job assignments and on-the-job training as well. Clean toilets is what I was referencing, and other things related to how to keep and retain, bring in and retain women of color and BIPOC workers, right? And later on, we're going to show you a little template on how to send a communication to public officials. But these are all things that are already included in existing federal law under OSHA and EO 11246. So, next slide. So, this is a little bit about the state funding infrastructure. and what it should be doing. So this is a lot. There's a lot of text here, but we're going to go through it together because this is important. So we have in all their bid specifications, federally assisted infrastructure projects, very clear language, contractors will be evaluated based on their compliance with the Executive Order 11246, including non-discrimination and that 6.9% goal, right? And also the state infrastructure funding should have robust mechanisms for the state to educate their contractors and subcontractors about the executive order obligations and to monitor their compliance with those obligations on a real-time basis. So make sure that there's oversight to say, like, there's no loopholes for people skipping around saying we tried. No, like, show us what you did as goodwill, right? And so that's just like making sure there's enforcement and oversight. Ensure that every federally assisted infrastructure contract covers the administrative expenses of this education and monitoring. So there's funding, allocated actual monetary resources to actually have that oversight and those accountabilities to make sure that they can abide by it, right? And ensure that all apprentices working on their federally assisted infrastructure projects have access to supportive services, including paying for construction hours like childcare, transportation, tools, and fees, either by requiring prime contractors to devote sufficient monies from their contracts, or by the State Department of Transportation or other agencies themselves, or the other agency itself, using a portion of the federal monies to provide these resources and these services. And lastly, ensure a harassment-free job site. This is like the common sense, but these are the pieces that fall off, you know, and aren't prioritized when it comes to health, safety, wellness in our work sites, right? These are the priorities we want to make sure are enforced and held to a standard when it comes to infrastructure spending with this new progressive democratic, you know, administration, right? The next slide. So who are our targets for advocacy, right? Some will be like, it depends, right? But most we're going to name them generally, but some of them can overlap from target to allies. So, you know, it depends on where they stand on the political spectrum, but basically for the just generic purposes of explaining, right? We want to make sure that we're targeting our governors. We want to make sure we're talking to state legislators, the Department of Transportation, federal legislators, Office of Federal Contract Compliance Programs of OFCCP, other state agencies as well, right? So there could be some overlap and intersection. So these are the places in which we know that these agencies can leverage their power to make sure that the things we talked about in the previous slide are enforced. Next slide, 22. So this is the sample letter I was referencing earlier. Like I said, you'll have this after the presentation, but this is sort of like an example of what we could be saying to our legislators, our governors, right? Those targets I had just talked about. It's basically introducing yourself, saying who you're with. You know, it's always great to say you're with the National Taskforce, and why this is important, why you're writing them and why it's important to you, and talking, you know, to giving the rundown of what's important to you with this infrastructure monies that are coming in, that we don't want these things to fall off, right? We want to make sure that this person executes and exercises their power for our interests as well, right? As our elected officials. So, and our agencies that are run, you know, for us. So that's the sample letter. Next slide. It's for Connie.
So again, if you're feeling overwhelmed, remember you could do a little and make an impact. You could do a lot and have more of an impact. And even a little bit matters. It's together we can really make a difference in this, and each person doing a little adds up to a whole lot. So your actions might be different depending on whether you're an individual and you're not connected to any group or organization in your state. If you already work with a group, either a tradeswomen organization, a union tradeswomen support group, or other group, if you're a member of a Black, Indigenous, and people of color, BIPOC, or other advocacy group, such as a national chapter, a local chapter of the National Urban League, Jobs with Justice, the League of Women Voters. There's a lot of really great advocacy organizations out there that could be helpful that you are joining with. Or you might want to convene an advocacy group to work together with you on this. Next slide, please. I'm going to turn it over to Liz to talk about some potential allies.
Thank you, Connie. So diving like a little bit more specifically, obviously, if you have a tradeswomen organization in your area or in your state, you do have a regional women's bureau. So Women's Bureau is under the U.S. Department of Labor, and it turns out there have been a lot of really fantastic allies there. Sort of joke about the sort of middle-aged women who've been wanting to make a difference in this space for a long time, but haven't necessarily known how to from the Women's Bureau. But then when they get connected with the tradeswomen, they can be really helpful navigating the hierarchy in the federal and state organizations. They can add a little federal presence if you have a gathering or try to have a meeting with a local state official. To have the Federal Women's Bureau there just adds a little bit of extra gravitas there. They've been hugely helpful in our part of the country. Jobs with Justice has chapters, I think, in pretty much every state. And we have one rep here with Martha, but there's many folks. Pulling together women in your network who could benefit from these jobs. We've been holding a number of meetings lately and asking how many tradeswomen have worked on federally funded construction or on any kind of transportation jobs. And at least here, the numbers have been tiny. Hopefully it's higher where you are, but may not be. As Connie said, local cultural and political groups. Do you have a workers' rights center in your area? They may be able to be a huge ally. And some of you may already be connected to all these. So some of this is sort of directed at somebody new to this space. If you have a women's commission in your state or in your city, your state representative or senator, and again, the money comes from the feds, like the Federal Department of Transportation to the State Department of Transportation. So it's your state Department of Transportation that's going to be spending a little over half of what your state gets. So these state officials are particularly important. Workforce board. So I had a meeting recently with the executive director of our state workforce board and told her that there's language in BIL that the state workforce board could use to increase recruitment and training of more women and people of color to get into these jobs. She did not know this. We shared a document, which we'll share with you afterwards. I sent it to her. I'm like, here's all the language, but you're going to need, like the workforce part of the state is going to need to fight for this money so that it doesn't all just get spent on concrete or steel. And so I'm in the midst of sort of navigating that with her. And then just thinking maybe, as we keep moving, put in the chat if there's other allies that you have worked with or that all this list makes you think of, feel free to share them. Great, go ahead to the next slide. So we have about 9 minutes, I think, for discussion. Connie, tell me if that's right. Or tell me.
Let's cut it down to 8 minutes.
All right, so we have until a minute or two before the top of the hour. And just because I really, this was so scary to me in the beginning, and maybe it's not to you, maybe this is no big deal to you, I don't know. But we just thought it'd be helpful to have people, raise your hand either visually or using your little Zoom hand. And I'll call on folks and just what's one thing, as we're very quickly laying out a whole lot of stuff to you so far, what's one thing that could get in your way with taking action where you are, and what's one way you might mitigate, like what's one way you might get over that obstacle. So just, I think it'd be helpful, or we think it'd be helpful for people to hear from a few people, like what's one thing that seems like an obstacle to this and one way you might get over it. And then if you can briefly, who might be an ally in your area.
So possible action steps, there's a lot of things that are in our way, but there's a lot of possibility when we unite and we stay committed to our values, our principles, and our vision, right? And that's what organizing is all about. I mean, we are facing some tough, heavy, ugly times. There's a multitude of things happening in today's landscape politically, like I mentioned, and in our just general environment. And so like, it's really, really important to have faith, keep spirit, maintain and respect our relations so that we can move smoothly and swiftly and strategically around possible action steps. And so these are just a list of examples of things that you can do that are, you know, tangible, that are powerful, and every action has a reaction. I don't know, that's some science stuff, but all of the things that we put in, all the little like glitter is magic, right? It adds up. It adds up and it's powerful. Every piece that we do, no matter what, it may feel like it's not, but when we look back, it is. So these are some examples. Like I said, send a letter to your state governor, ask your state department of transportation how you can have impact on their plans, or get on an advisory committee, you know, testify to a meeting of the Transportation Commission, get a meeting together yourselves of your friends and your allies, not those weirdo conservatives that Alexandra was talking about, but actual people who have commonality, common interests, right? And our power is in our people and in our action and our ability to speak up as one, right? And create yourself a plan of action. Meet with your regional OFCCP folks, right? That's the ultimate like agency that we have to hold accountable and hold to the standard with this. And ask your DOL, your Department of Labor Women's Bureau folks to attend meetings when possible, right? And ask your unions local to endorse this and get involved. And you know, we all know how that's an uphill battle. It takes time, but I mean, like, we just have to have faith and be persistent. And then other things are mentioned there, rallies, right? Like direct action, door knocking, petitions. It all comes with an escalation plan, but these are just some general ideas. I was gonna ask, any of the above can go better if you have an elected official who wants to be part of this, to sign letters with you, to attend meetings. But you'll have more time to reflect on this and review. You're going to get a copy of this, right? And you know, it's all about experimenting. Organizing is about thinking, reflecting, being the right people, bringing your right friends in the room, and just seeing what happens. If we don't act, that's, you know, it's better to act than to stay, how you say, like frozen, right? So that's just one thing I would say is like, it's all about sticking together, experimenting, organizing and reorganizing. I'll pass it over to Liz for the next slide.
Sorry, this falls under the like work smarter, not harder. So if OFCCP is supposed to enforce this, then maybe you want to talk to OFCCP. I will tell you that there are some parts of the country that I know of OFCCP folks who really care, have worked really hard, and have done some really good jobs on mega projects over the years and gotten really good numbers. And there are some parts of the country where there are OFCCP staff who don't seem to care and have done terrible jobs on mega projects and whatever. So I don't want to kind of lead you down the garden path around OFCCP. I would encourage folks to check them out, know this history of lack of enforcement, and maybe say, like, I want to know what you're doing. I want to know if you're interested in working with a local group on, you know, meeting these workforce goals. You know, I have a lot to learn. Maybe we can learn together. One really important thing I learned about speaking with elected and other fancy people is it's okay to call and say, here's what I see as a problem. Can you help me figure it out how the solution? Because I always thought I had to call and say, I need you to do X. And if you know what X is, that's great, but it is okay to call elected officials and say, I need your help to figure out how to do this. It won't work with everyone, but with some. So on this website, and again, this will be shared, the PowerPoint will be shared, you'll be able to find your local OFCCP staff. I think it's great for us to build relationships with them and to try to hold them accountable. And you may find a gem that's been dying to do this, but has been held back by, you know, previous administrations or whatever, and who will be thrilled to work with you. So I think that's one, figuring out who your OFCCP person is and build a relationship and see what you think. If are they going to help, or are they a waste of your time? But dig in a minute to check it out. And I think that goes to Connie.
Now we're going to hold it open for questions. So please raise your hand. Use the little reaction button and raise your hand if you have a question. Turn it over to Martha to take us on the next session to think about what is your individual action plan.
Brad, are we still going to do breakouts in this one? Oh, you're on mute.
We're on time too.
Okay, cool.
Yes.
All right, so this is what's going down. We're going to have you spend a few minutes writing your reflection. We're going to break you out into groups of 3 or 4. Right. How did that go for y'all? Like, how do you feel? Like, did people hold you down in your ideas and your worries? Anybody have like initial ideas? I'll call people out. So yeah, just drop any other reflections you want in the chat as we move into the next slides. You know, the power is in our ideas. They can never take that away from us, and our minds. So keep the fire going in ideas. Here's some resources that we're going to send out, just a little list. Oh, this is Connie's part. I'll kick it over to Connie right here.
Okay, go back to the resources. So we'll be sending out these slides and resources with a lot of links of things that you can research, and also some documents, the template for the letters, and more information on the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. And again, I want to note that the task force is staffed by volunteers, so we're able to answer questions, but we're not able to directly be involved in any different state. Next slide, please. So we are going to do a community of practice. We'll get us all back together in about 3 months to check in and go do a deeper dive on some of the ways that you can be involved. And we'll also send out some, we call them office hours, so you can sign up for a one-on-one time with task force policy advocates to bring your specific questions. I'm also going to put the website for the National Taskforce on Tradeswomen's Issues in the chat. If you're not a member, you can sign up. We welcome our brothers to be involved, and you can sign up to be part of the task force and be on our regular meetings. And finally, thank you for joining us to learn how to advocate for a better future for tradeswomen and our brothers of color in the trades.
We want to take a,
I want to take a moment to thank our presenters, Martha and Liz. Fantastic job. Martha, your enthusiasm is amazing. Liz, you know so much. I really appreciate how much you know. And our wonderful tech person, Eve. Show your face, Eve, and let us appreciate you. Yay! We need tech people. We'd love to have you join the task force and be involved at that level. And if everybody could just put one word in the chat about what this meant for you tonight. And for me, my word is inspiring. It's always inspiring to get together with tradeswomen advocates and activists and allies that want to make a difference in the world. So we'll leave it open for a few more minutes for people to put their thoughts in the chat. And again, we'll be sending out information, documents, and the PowerPoint and a link to the recording so that you can revisit this and learn even more.